Welcome, everyone, to my 30-minute Zoom session. Thank you for figuratively or literally having lunch with me today. You know, executive presence is a concept that to some is kind of like a unicorn. It's a mythical quality, like, does it really exist? I used to feel that way about Bernie Doodles, the Bernese Mountain Dog, and poodles. I used to think they didn't really exist. They were just an urban legend. Executive presence is a skill, which means it can be learned. Just like if any of you have joined masterclass in these, this COVID time, masterclass can teach you how to make an egg, how to plant a garden. It's a skill that is a learnable skill. So first, let's look at what it is. It's a set of learned behaviors that enable you to command attention, to inspire confidence. It is a learned skill. One reason that it's important is that it's a gift that you both give yourself because you get to move your agenda faster, you get to be promoted faster, you get your ideas accepted faster, but it's also a gift to your audience. So if you think about it, if you were interviewing 10 candidates for a C-level position, the one that exhibited executive presence would make it easier for you because it goes beyond capability. It goes beyond resume. It's that quality that says, I want that person. And that makes it easier for the decision makers. That's why it's a gift you give your audience as well as a gift that you give yourself. I'm using these people, and they're both female, as you can notice, and I would say 2021 so far has really been the year of the female. These are two women that show executive presence. The Peloton instructor, her name is Leanne Hainsby. She has been with Peloton about 18 months. There are 26 Peloton instructors that they use for all of their classes. She has zoomed to the top. She is an icon. She is a pop culture figure. All of the instructors are good. Cody was a backup dancer for Britney Spears, and Robin Arzon was a New York attorney that gave it up to be a Peloton instructor. But there's this executive presence quality that just made Leanne Hainsby just zoom to the top of popularity. On the left, you may recognize from the impeachment hearings, this is Stacey Plaskett. She's a non-voting delegate to Congress from the Virgin Islands. Now, there were 9 impeachment managers, 3 of them women. I cannot tell you who the other 2 women are, but I know Stacey Plaskett largely because of that dress. Without the Superman, our Superwoman logo that was given to her by the internet, but the dress said, "Look at me." And she was prepared for the moment. Now, an interesting backstory that's going to partly give you a lesson about executive presence. After the impeachment was over and she was asked about the dress, where'd you get the dress? She gave the website. It's now, I think, like 66% off if you should want it. But she said, what's more important is how I came to be dressed for the impeachment hearings. Her girlfriends, her team, her honest mirror, got together and said, Stacey, dressing well is not your forte. We are going to pick out your outfits for you. They went to her closet, they picked out her outfits, they picked out how she was going to accessorize them. Now, in addition, she is an attorney. She is very articulate. You can't
What did you get? I'm starving.
You just can't get the visible. You have to be ready, but being capable is not enough. She's the only one out of 9 managers. She's the only one that we know who she is. Everybody needs their own posse, their village, their team. Now, this is Putin, if you don't recognize him. Now, look at this. He is shaking the hand of the President of the United States and not even giving him eye contact. That is not an example of executive presence. But it does remind me of a story that I want you to remember as a what not to do. A couple decades ago, there was a company in Akron, Royce Security. They were the first company that you could hire security people when you needed them. And they were started by a guy named Chuck Patton, who was an ex-Secret Service guy. And his strategy when he went into a room, or if he went into a bar, or if he went into a restaurant, if he went into any kind of gathering, his strategy was to walk in the door looking down at something, you know, his phone, look at your purse, look in your pocket. Don't make eye contact. And he would navigate to a place around the room where he could scope things out, and then he would decide what he was going to do. That is not executive presence. Choosing to not have direct eye contact is not executive presence, but in a minute, I'm going to give you 8 tips for what is executive presence. When I started showing horses at the national level, I was in my teens, early 20s. There was a woman named Mrs. Robson. This is not her, but the internet does not give me pictures that far back. But this is what she kind of looked like driving her horse. She drove a horse and she rode a horse. When she came through that entrance gate, you did not look at anyone else. She had a huge smile on her face, and everything about her said, "Look at me," and you did. Well, a couple decades later, I was watching the Westminster Dog Show, and they named the winning dog, and they showed the owner, and guess who it was? Mrs. Robson, sitting there with that smile on her face that said, "I own the dog show also." So I found an article that the New York Times had written about her 4-legged and 2-legged champions. What Mrs. Robson did was take all the oxygen out of the air for everybody else, because she said, "Look at me," and she had the skills to support that. Now, presence is not just about your God-given height. So if you think, well, I'm tall, I don't need to worry because everyone sees me, or I'm short and I can't do anything about that. Presence is not about your God-given height. The Sixers is Allen Iverson. If you ever want to laugh, look up his riff on the word practice, and you will laugh till you cry. But Allen Iverson was a very accomplished top 50 NBA player. He is 8 inches shorter than LeBron. This is actually instructions that I got from a client. He actually said to me, "Make her 2 inches taller." Amy was identified for a C-level position, but there were some challenges. Just to name a few, he said she has no executive presence. She doesn't make eye contact. She looks at the ceiling. She kind of slithers into a room. We don't even know she's there. She has poor posture. And she talks with her hand in front of her mouth. Can you fix her? So let's find out in 8 tips that can help your skill of executive presence. Some of you have heard me say that the strategic, the vision is what is going to happen. The tactical is how it happens. What do you want to do at horse talk? You want to move the horse down the field. How do you do it is the tactical. Be diligent with yourself. The more you are talking in the tactical, the less executive presence you are going to have. The higher up you go on the organizational chart, it's the what, it's the vision that is talked about, not the how. You know, when John Kennedy, in his inaugural speech, when he talked about going to the moon and being the first one to win the space wars, he had no plan, he had no how. It was his job to say the what. During the campaign, he arrived at the University of Michigan kind of in the middle of the night and was planning to go straight to the hotel and was told that 10,000 students were waiting for him. So he went and talked to them, and he said to them, "How many of you are willing to work for this country?" And the Peace Corps was born. There was no how, didn't know what's the age limit, what's the education, where are you going to go, how long are you going to stay. That's the tactical. His genius was the vision of young people going to work for this country. So be diligent with yourself. The more you talk in the what, the more executive presence you will have. Tip number 2, understand how others experience you. It's not about, well, I said this, I meant this. How do they experience you? You know, I remember a coach when I was in high school and I was a cheerleader, the basketball coach would go on and on about how differently he had to treat each player. Some players, he said, I can yell at and they're fine with it. Some players I yell at and they will sulk for a week because that's how the player experiences that coach. So understand not how you want to come across, understand more how others experience you. A few years back, I was working with a young woman who had been named a partner in a CPA firm. And the managing partner, who was 30 some years older than her, complained to me one day that, you know, I passed her in the hallway and she didn't say good morning to me. And I just looked at him and I said, wait a minute, you're complaining that a 30-something young woman scared to death of you didn't say good morning to you? Did you say good morning to her? Because he was not understanding how others experienced both his title and his physical being. Tip number 3, build your communication wheel. You know, if you followed it all, there have been some hearings about the January 6th insurrection, and there have been some police officers that have been testifying. Well, the former New York commissioner said the number one problem in bad policing is poor communication. Poor communication. He didn't say the number one problem was too many guns or this or that. Poor communication. Tip number 3, build your communication wheel. You know, when somebody might look at some of my clients and it might be a 15-year-old client and it might be a 65-year-old client, and where's the similarity? Each spoke on that wheel is a different challenge in communication. And if you want to increase your executive presence, you have to make sure that you are working and you're efficient at all of those things. You might be great at giving a formal speech, but your one-on-one may be very intimidating. And the problem with that is that you won't get the feedback you need. You want to think about one-on-one, do I want to sit next to this person or do I want to sit across from this person? Do I want the full authority of my desk between us or do I want to be seated next to them? Or do I want to be in the cafeteria? Every one of those spokes, an interview, you know, your lighting. You know, 3 male clients in the last few weeks I've had get better lighting and a microphone for all the Zoom sessions that they're doing. How are you at interviews, one-on-one, formal speaking, informal speaking, off-the-cuff speaking, small group, large group, when you're a participant in a meeting, as well as when you're leading a meeting. Executive presence, executives have said that 2/3 of executive presence is, do you have the ability to convey confidence in all aspects, all spokes of that communication wheel? Most of the time we seek to be understood. In tip number 4, if you want to increase your executive presence, I'm saying understand before being understood. You know, on Monday on Forum 360, the TV show that I host, I'm interviewing a national figure, which I'm already very anxious about. But he has started this gang of grace. He calls it a gang of grace, 500 people that are to communicate grace to people that they don't agree with. So understand where someone is coming from. Again, we spend all of our energy in wanting to communicate where we are coming from. If you want to stand out, understand before you seek being understood. Be still. Having executive presence is not about a frenetic energy. You know, in the fall, I worked with a young woman that had wanted to become director of her department. And there were 2 candidates, she and another person. I worked with her. I was worried about her being chosen for one reason, and it's this tip number 5. She's not still. She's the frenetic energy. And sometimes we do need that. If you've come to Horse Talk, or if you ever come to Horse Talk, you will hear me talk about the value of energy. You need energy to move a proposition forward. You need energy to keep going through an interview process. But as an executive with presence, you need to know when to be still, when to be calm. Several years ago, when I'd started working, my first big purchase was 2 Browns tickets, which I gave up later, but that's a whole nother story. I had 2 Browns tickets. And I had a very hard time finding guys that wanted to go with me, because guys want to go with guys to a Browns game, and they want to,
following up on the conversation I had with Ryan about getting FileMaker.
Someone mute themselves, please. Thank you. And so I went to a Browns game with a guy that had been a quarterback at North Carolina State.
It's called FileMaker. It's our
track that you're muted
internally in marketing.
Okay, we'll do it for you. Mute at the top. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I was watching the game with a quarterback who had played college. Whoops, back. Can you go back for me? Had played college football. Back again. And I remember, yeah, there we go. And I remember asking him the 3rd quarter, is it time to panic? He said, it's not time to panic. 4th quarter, we're still behind by a touchdown. Is it time to panic? Not time to panic. 4 minutes left. Is it time to panic? Not time to panic. 2 minutes, time to panic? Nope, not time to panic. That's why he was a quarterback. Be still. Reflect on your own habits. I have found in my very unscientific study that men and women have some different negative and positive habits. Men, more often than women, I catch with their hand in front of their mouth. That is blocking your message. You say you want to be heard, and then you make it harder for us to hear you. Some of you have heard me say women tend to end sentences with their voice up, which makes something sound like a question. Men may ask too many questions. Sometimes, not that they're stupid, they just don't realize they were just already answered. Women don't ask enough questions. So reflect on your habits. Remember, we said Stacy Plaskett had her own team to be an honest mirror. Whether I'm your honest mirror or someone else or a team, make sure it's an honest mirror. Yesterday I was in a Zoom session with a candidate that's running for Congress. She has a whole team, but apparently no one is being an honest mirror. So make sure you reflect on your habits. Do more of what is effective and reduce or eliminate what is not effective. Connect, don't transact. When Keith Dambrot was coach at the University of Akron men's basketball, he could tell you, of course, the names of his players, their girlfriends' names, their dogs' names, their parents, and that's why, as a coach, his players would do anything for him. Connecting is not a transaction of how are you, I am fine. I had a woman that did Horse Talk one year. She was in HR, and she was identified as a possible next vice president of HR at a global company. And she was a micromanager, I could see from the day at Horse Talk. And I said, tell me about how you start your morning. And she said, oh, well, I stand at the door and I greet each person as they come in every morning. That was not connecting. All she was trying to do was see exactly what time people were coming, and she was pretending that that was connecting. Oh, how are you? How was your weekend? So make sure, again, look in your honest mirror and make sure that you are connecting. So if I asked you, I will tell clients, keep a virtual or a real file, an old-fashioned paper file on your team, and keep adding. So there's Mary, Keep adding, she got a new dog. What kind of dog did she get? What's the dog's name? Where is are her kids, or is her kid applying to college? Where are they going to college? Are they going to start in the summer? Are they going to start in the fall? Where is their new house? How did they pick that house? Keep adding each time into that file, literally adding, because that's a way to connect. You need people underneath you on the organizational chart that will have your back, and you need people above you that will have your back. I knew a guy one time that wanted to be CEO, and his strategy was, and sometimes you may hear me say any strategy is better than no strategy. His strategy was that he was very connected to the people below him on the organizational chart, and they would do anything for him. The problem was that it was the board that was picking the next CEO, and there wasn't a connection there. So connect, don't transact. And tip number 8, the 3 V's of confidence: the verbal, the vocal, the visual. I use Martin Luther King for a couple reasons. I am the great defender of Martin Luther King. And the reason I say that is, like executive presence, people ask me, are people born great speakers? It's the same thing. Well, are people born with presence? Is it something that you're just born with? And I think sometimes they ask it because they think, well, if I wasn't born with it, then I don't have to work on it because I can't get it. No, it's a skill. If you ever listen to, and you can find this on YouTube, Martin Luther King on Meet the Press sounds very different than Martin Luther King at the Lincoln Monument giving the so-called I Have a Dream speech. But the verbal are the words we say, the vocal is how we say them, and the visual is what we look saying them. The reason I used him is that when he gave the I Have a Dream speech, it was at a very low point in his career. The movement was kind of passing him by. He hadn't had any big wins, and he was just kind of another guy talking about equality. And then he gave this speech, and 100,000 people came to Washington. He gave this speech, which again, I call it the so-called I Have a Dream speech because it was really 2 different speeches. The first half, he read it. His visual was not good. He was not connecting with the audience as a speaker. So remember, we said that the real goal of executive presence is to be able to instill confidence. And that comes to the words we say, how we say them, and what we look like saying them, which is why it's important to study Martin Luther King. The other reason I use him is that people will say, well, he was just a born orator, you know, he had a great voice. Well, I say no one comes out of the womb being a great speaker. He left, when he had an important speech, he left his family, 4 kids, went to a hotel, on index cards, wrote his speech out, crossed things out, added things. And then people, to me, it's insulting to say, well, he was just a great speaker. No, he worked at it just like you can work at increasing your executive presence. Anyone can be Superwoman. Remember I said she really didn't walk around with Superwoman on her chest. The internet gave that to her. There were 9 managers. We can't name all 9. In fact, the only other one I can name is Jamie Raskin, who was head of the hearings. And the reason I can name him is that you may remember he had the tragic story of his son committing suicide in the end of December. And then he still, took on this job. A former constitutional lawyer, but not a great amount of presence. So even though he spoke more than Stacy did, less memorable. And the other 8, even less memorable, I would say. So when you think about executive presence, here is Stacy Plaskett, not even a voting member of Congress, that is the woman that we ended up talking about and looking at. That's an example of seizing the moment, being ready for the moment, and your verbal, vocal, visual all being congruent, being capable, but capable isn't enough, and going beyond capable for executive presence. And remember her lesson, it took a team, it's hard work, and we need to be able to communicate effectively. I started out saying that your executive presence is a gift. It's a gift that you give yourself, and it's a gift you give your audience, because it makes their choices so much easier for the one that has executive presence. I also have another gift for you. I have an evaluation that I have put together so that you can fill in what your executive presence numbers are. If you would like that, it's very simple. I think there's 10 characteristics, and you will give them a 1 through 10. If you would like that, just email me and I would be glad to email it to you. It goes from poise under presence, decisiveness, speaking skills, ability to read an audience are some of them. That would be my gift to you for you giving me the gift of your time. Sometimes people ask me, well, you know, this was interesting, but I don't really know exactly what you do or how to use you. So I have a testimonial about my speaking, coaching, speech writing. And of course, I would love to have you come and join us for Horse Talk. Since we were able to do it in 2020, I'm confident we'll be able to do it in 2021 since it is outside. Our next session is on how to present to the executive level, which really is how to present, because in my world, you're going to present the same way with very few words is a hint. Our next Horse Talk is June, and Camp Next, if you know anyone between the ages of 14 and 26, hopefully that will be my first event in person, August 15th. After about a 16-month hiatus of events. Whether we do it inside or outside, we're not quite sure at the moment, but think about who you might send. The beginning and end time is a promise you make your audience. I have time for 1 or 2 questions if anyone has a question or 2. Anyone?
Hey, this is Lakeisha. I have a question.
Lakeisha.
If you see someone that you think kind of is a great example of that, is it appropriate to ask if they worked on their executive presence or if it was something that came natural to them? And if so, how
it is. It is. The only thing I would be careful of is this. When something comes easy to us, whether it's playing golf or tennis or executive presence, we tend to devalue it. When it's hard for us, we value it greatly, and we will pour money into golf lessons, you know, or tennis lessons. So I would just be careful that they may, if it comes easy to them, they may devalue it just because it's easier for them. Oh, it's no big deal. It doesn't mean it's no big deal, but for them, it truly may be no big deal. So just kind of be diligent in what you get, and kind of like you're panning for gold, you know, pan through that sand for those gold nuggets they can give you, because they may not be obvious if it comes easier to them. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. With anything, when it comes easier to us, it's harder. That's why you rarely see a really good athlete be a good coach, because it comes easy to them. I mean, Michael Jordan's not even a good owner, because it comes easy to them to where to play, you know, how to use their teammates, when to shoot, when not to shoot. It comes easy to them, and it's hard for them to be able to coach that. And I would also add, you know, we talked about eye contact. I was on the Zoom session with a congressional candidate yesterday. Eye contact on Zoom is very, very important. You need the discipline to keep looking at the camera and not the screen, because your eye contact, if you look at the screen, is not going to be directly with your audience. So eye contact is still important on Zoom, but have the discipline to keep focused on the camera so that you can protect your eye contact. Any last comment or question?
Leslie, this is.
Do you read?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you
got
repeat
two.
the horse talk and the camps periodically?
I'm sorry, do I what with horse talk?
Repeat the horse talk and the camp sessions periodically.
Yes, I have 3 horse talks this summer.
Mhm.
And the camp next I do usually once a year.
Okay, because that way if I miss this year, maybe next year.
Well, maybe, but hey, who knows what next year will bring? So come this year. You know, it's like eat dessert first. You never know what's going to happen. So eat dessert first.
I like that.
Christine.
Yes. You know, it's funny because as you were talking about this and the spokes, you know, I was thinking about, my mind went to Kamala Harris, you know. I'm thinking back, first time I ever met her or, you know, knew of her was a function that Sherrod Brown had put on for, I don't know, it was it was some sort of women's conference in Columbus, Ohio. And she was one of the speakers, and I didn't know who she was before that, very little, maybe it was half a dozen years ago, maybe. But I was bowled over by her. And then of course I started seeing her in the news and, you know, in the hearings and whatnot. I thought she was amazing. But it's interesting when she was running last year, I saw her interviewed, and I don't remember who the interview was, but I thought, okay, she's fantastic in small group, you know, talks, fantastic there. She's, as far as, you know, her presence when she's interrogating somebody, fantastic. But I thought, I was watching her being interviewed, you know, it was a Today Show or whatever it was. And I thought, okay, this is not her. She's got something to work on here. I just
Well,
thought,
you know,
she may have been having an off day too, but I thought it was very interesting.
Yes.
You know,
And you know, on the opposite of that, I saw Cory Booker speak last year, the last event I went to a year ago, the last event, 18,000 people in Washington, D.C. He raised the roof. I mean, I am sure that the roof on the Washington Convention Center is 6 inches higher today from his speech. He raised the roof, but he was not able to do that in the debates.
Yeah,
and if you remember, Obama was known as a great speaker, but he lost the first debate with Romney. As a sitting president, he lost the first debate with Romney. So these are all different spokes, and we have to continue to work on them. And sometimes styles change, and what was good 5 years ago needs to be revamped. So that's a great example of not being as effective at all spokes, and continually want to be working on that, because that might be the only time someone sees her is the interview. And then they're going to have a different take on her. So that's a good point. Any last words before we close up?
Thank you.
Go forward and work tip by tip. Take one tip and work on it. You all have more executive presence. I look forward to seeing you along the journey. I'm here if I can help in any way. Thank you.